बच्चों के हकूक़ से मुतालिक कौमी कमीशन NCRC के तहत पाकिस्तान में कम उम्री की शादी के कानूनी फ्रेमवर्क पर पॉलिसी ब्रीफ और यूनिसेफ के ताउन से किए गए सर्वे इल्म रवैया तर्ज अमल की रिपोर्ट मुशावरती
So the study in particular aims to bring attention to decision-making processes that really deeply root the cause of child marriage, and to examine the social and behaviour factors that influence people's, caregivers and children themselves, decision-making processes around marriage. So the study had 4 phases to it. It was quite a long process, and it was conducted on the backdrop of COVID. So there were quite a number of delays that were encountered along the way, given those particular circumstances. The 4 phases included a phase 1 which was qualitative research with adults, and then a second phase on quantitative data with adults. And then the third phase repeated that sequence of qualitative data with children and then quantitative data with children. So the rationale for this was to gather qualitative and have equal participation of men and women, boys and girls, and urban and rural. So overall, in terms of the quantitative component, it was almost 2,500 interviews with adults. And on the next slide, Moish, you go down, we had almost 1,200 interviews with children. So I think that we have heard and we will continue to hear through the interventions this afternoon the situation of child marriage in Pakistan. I will try not to be too repetitive with those remarks, but just to highlight the 2 that have really stood out to me from this morning's presentations have been around while child marriage has declined in Pakistan over the last 3 decades, it continues to be a very significant issue, with around 18.3% of women still being married before the age of 18, and Pakistan still being or discrepancy between respondents' understanding of what they think they should do and what they actually do. And that, I think, is what this piece of research really brings into the spacing of child marriage, is considering this discrepancy in conditional preferences and unconditional preferences. Back on some of these findings, we also found that, of course, children are not very actively involved in decision-making processes around marriage, nor are they encouraged to be involved, that these decisions lie with their elders, that most respondents, while believing that child marriage has negative consequences, almost half of them also felt that it provides a very important social protection for girls. Most people did not think that incidents of child marriage should ever be reported, that these are concerns for the family, and that we shouldn't be seeking or involving external entities in family business such as child marriage. And most respondents also felt that both parents, the male caregiver and the female caregiver, are equally responsible for deciding upon the marriage of a girl and a boy, which is also important for considering how we may be designing programmatic interventions. You want to move ahead? Okay, so when it comes to the findings for children themselves, the study has separated them so that we're able to understand the attitudes and knowledges from the caregivers' perspectives and those of children, again, so that we can have quite nuanced interventions. So for children, many children considered school interruption and increased responsibility to be the most negative consequences of child marriage, compared to the health consequences that were identified by their adult respondents. And likewise, for children, most were unaware of any legal frameworks or laws prohibiting child marriage and had no clue that there was a minimum age of marriage in their province, again, whether that was the laws of 16 or in Sindh for 18. In terms of attitudes, similarly to adults, the children that we interviewed also believed that 18 was the youngest age that children should be married. We found that boys were more likely to say that child marriage has positive consequences than girls, and that boys were more likely to say that child marriage should be reported when it is occurring to law enforcement agencies or otherwise. But they felt that the family was a barrier for reporting. And nearly all respondents indicated that in their family, girls married after 18. So again, we're seeing quite a bit of difference between what people are sharing as their practices and what is occurring en masse across the country. The study then highlights some very key recommendations around how we may go about considering shifting social and behavioural factors that influence people's decision making. And so there were sort of more or less 4 or 5 key recommendations for child marriage. Those related with stigma, particularly around reporting, those around promoting channels through which children can report child marriage, or if they are at risk of child marriage, such as the helplines 1121. A focus on social marketing efforts around community pledges to shift social norms that are accepting of child marriage. So these are the types of interventions that seek to tap into the collective cultural views that promote that collective identity over the individual desires. And to look at conditional cash transfers, those such as those related to education that have shown some positive outcomes around keeping girls in school and delaying marriage. So that's the highlights from the KAP. We will make available to anybody who's interested the full version of the study, which covers the 4 themes as mentioned at the beginning. But for now, what you have on your desk is a nice summary extract. Thanks very much.